All right, let's just jump right into this one because we are opening a genuinely fascinating and honestly highly unusual true crime case file today. We're looking at the 1974 anomaly of WNRV 88.6 FM. Now, it's incredibly easy to just brush off stories of phantom broadcasts as, well, spooky local ghost stories. But we're not doing that today. We are treating this exactly as it should be treated, as a rigorous clinical investigation into a mass disappearance and a massive technological impossibility. We're going to look strictly at the timeline, the physical evidence, and the documented broadcast irregularities that literally left an entire town terrified.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's how we're structuring this case file. First, we'll look at the WNRV station profile, then reconstruct the timeline of the vanishing and analyze the crime scene physical evidence. After that, we'll document the impossible broadcast returns, examine the highly controversial missing deputy recording, and finally wrap up with the demolition and lingering anomalies.
Moving right into Section 1, the WNRV station profile and the baseline operations of 88.6 FM.
So, before we can even begin to understand the anomaly itself, we really need to look at the baseline environment. What was normal here? Well, WNRV was a small, honestly kind of forgotten station, isolated right outside a quiet West Virginia town. By day, operations were entirely mundane. Standard country music, routine weather reports, local news, the whole shebang. It was basically the friendly, predictable heartbeat of this sleepy rural community. But, and here's what's really interesting about this, after hours, when only one lone employee remained in the building, the station's personality completely fractured. According to locals, this is when bizarre technical problems took over. We're talking unexplainable static, completely unidentified voices bleeding over the airwaves, and rogue signals just appearing from frequencies that officially didn't even exist. For months, management just brushed these off as quirky hardware issues until, well, they couldn't anymore.
Let's move to Section 2, the timeline of the vanishing on October 18, 1974.
Let's walk through the exact chronological timeline of that Friday night. At exactly 1:13 a.m., listeners reported that the music stopped abruptly. And I don't mean a slow fade out, I mean a hard, immediate cut. This was followed by nearly 30 seconds of just agonizingly dead air. Then, a heavily distorted voice came over the frequency, repeating a specific message 3 times before the signal vanished entirely. The immediate consequence of all this? By the very next morning, folks realized that both the station manager and the late-night host failed to return home. They had simply vanished.
So what was that message that actually interrupted the broadcast? Through the static, that distorted voice whispered a single, deeply chilling directive. Do not leave your homes. 3 times, right over the dead air. I really want you to keep that phrase in mind because its significance absolutely balloons as we dig deeper into the physical evidence.
Which brings us to Section 3, crime scene physical evidence and the initial police search. Later that Saturday afternoon, local police entered the station and they treated it as an active, completely sealed crime scene. Their investigation revealed a station that looked seemingly frozen in time. The inventory noted some really specific details, half-empty, still-warm coffee cups sitting right there on the main console. A pair of reading glasses left open on a logbook. Headphones just casually dropped on the floor, and the broadcast equipment itself, it was fully powered on and humming. It honestly looked like the staff had just stepped out for a quick cigarette break. But then, we have to look at what was missing. 0 employees present, absolutely no signs of a physical struggle, no blood, and perhaps most baffling for an isolated building surrounded by dirt, absolutely no footprints leading away from the exterior doors. 2 grown men vanished from a sealed environment without leaving a single trace behind.
Let's turn to Section 4, the impossible broadcast returns, 3 days later.
And this brilliantly illustrates how things went from bad to worse. Right as the town thought this mystery had peaked, 3 days later, at around 2 a.m., the station abruptly came back online. And the situation escalated from a bizarre missing persons case to an event of pure psychological terror. Listeners tuning in heard a slow voice pushing through heavy interference, but it wasn't a generic warning this time. The voice was methodically reading the specific names of town residents. People sitting right there in their living rooms suddenly heard highly personal, entirely unknown details about their own lives being broadcast over the air, all while dozens of overlapping whispers chattered underneath. You can imagine the psychological impact here. Residents reported feeling directly targeted, calling the broadcast a malicious violation of privacy. People were, understandably, absolutely terrified.
Panicked residents immediately called the police, who rushed back to the station within minutes. Which brings up the ultimate question of this entire investigation. How exactly does a dark station transmit?
Well, the short answer is, technically, it is impossible. When officers rushed back for their second visit, they documented massive technical irregularities. The entire building was pitch dark. The main breakers were functioning normally, sure, but the active transmission equipment was completely unpowered. There were no dials lit up, no vacuum tubes were warm. The hardware was dead. Yet, the massive signal interference patterns and those terrifying whispering voices were still actively broadcasting. They were literally vibrating through the radios in the police cruisers idling right outside the building. Crazy, right?
Moving right along to Section 5, the missing deputy recording, looking at the audio evidence. Now, according to police reports, one responding deputy was carrying a portable audio recorder as they approached the dark building. The chronological audio sequence allegedly captured on this tape is deeply, deeply unsettling. It starts off with several seconds of incredibly thick, heavy static. Then, a strange voice actually manages to break through that intense interference. And immediately following the voice, there is a violent burst of loud technical feedback, followed by the distinct, harrowing sound of distant screaming.
So what did that strange voice actually say right before the screaming began? Well, the isolated phrase captured on that severely distorted tape was, "They opened the door." That is a terrifyingly vague statement, especially considering the completely empty, footprint-free crime scene the police had documented just days prior.
But you guys, here is where the investigation hits a massive and frankly very suspicious roadblock. This audio evidence is officially lost. The recording was never actually released to the public, and the police department formally claimed the physical tape was simply misplaced. Yeah, right. Because of course, the single most crucial piece of evidence in a mass disappearance just magically walks out of an evidence locker. Naturally, this massive lack of transparency ignited all sorts of cover-up theories. Even today, fragmented distortions that are rumored to be the audio briefly appear on obscure online forums before quickly vanishing, though to be fair, none have ever been officially verified.
Let's move to our final section and see how this builds. Section 6, Demolition and Lingering Anomalies in the Aftermath. Fast forward to 1982, 8 years after the vanishing. The physical WNRV building was permanently demolished. The structure was completely leveled, which effectively turned the geographic location into a permanent dead end for any physical investigation. The hardware, the desks, the studio, all of it, gone.
However, the destruction of the building absolutely did not stop the phenomenon. Lingering anomalies persist right up to the modern day. Paranormal experts and local technicians alike still report bizarre signal interference patterns, sudden spikes in static or high-pitched electrical whining when driving near the demolished site late at night. It's actually spawned these deep local urban legends claiming that if you park near the empty lot and scan the old FM frequencies at exactly 1:13 a.m., which is the exact time the music stopped in 1974, you can hear the final broadcast. Listeners swear they can still detect a hidden voice buried deep beneath the static, just continuously repeating that original, distorted warning, "Do not leave your homes."
So, we've looked at the timeline, the utter lack of physical evidence, and the impossible technical anomalies of WNRV 88.6 FM, a station that somehow continued to speak long after its people were gone. So I'll leave you with a thought to consider as you digest this case file today. If you were scanning the dial late at night and heard a voice pushing through the static, would you listen to a signal that was never meant to be heard? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.